The British royal family has long been a symbol of tradition, duty, and public service. Yet beneath the carefully maintained facade of unity and grace, tensions have simmered for years, particularly surrounding one controversial figure, Queen Consort Camilla, whose path to the throne was paved with scandal and public disapproval, has never fully escaped the shadow of her past. Her affair with then Prince Charles during his marriage to Princess Diana remains a wound that many have never forgiven. Senior members of the royal family, including Princess Anne and Prince William, have made their reservations known, though always behind closed doors. Anne has been particularly vocal in private circles, arguing that Camilla should never have been granted the title of queen due to the circumstances of her relationship with Charles. William, fiercely protective of his mother's legacy and his own children, has maintained a careful distance, refusing to allow his family to embrace Camilla as one of their own. Even the late Queen Elizabeth, despite her public acceptance, reportedly harbored private doubts about the arrangement. For years, Camilla managed these quiet tensions with practiced composure, maintaining her public duties while navigating the complex dynamics within the palace walls. The calm, however, was destined to shatter. December 2024 brought with it not just the festive season, but a defining moment that would expose the fractures within the royal household in a way no one could have anticipated. King Charles, weakened by his ongoing battle with cancer, issued a directive that would set the stage for everything that followed. In an official memo distributed to all senior working royals, he outlined their responsibilities for the Christmas season. This was not to be a celebration of opulence and grandeur. Instead, the royal family was to spend the holidays visiting those often forgotten by society: orphanages, hospitals, nursing homes, and children's hospices. The visits were to be conducted with quiet dignity, focusing on genuine human connection rather than spectacle. There was to be no fanfare, no manufactured photo opportunities. The purpose was simple yet profound: to bring comfort, attention, and kindness to those who needed it most during a season that can be painfully isolating for many. The responsibility of organizing these visits fell to Princess Anne, a woman whose reputation for meticulous planning and flawless execution is legendary within royal circles. Anne approached the task with her characteristic diligence, drawing upon decades of experience in public service. She crafted a detailed schedule, assigning each royal family member to specific locations with carefully considered timing and purpose. Her goal extended beyond mere logistics. She understood that these visits represented an opportunity for the monarchy to demonstrate its relevance and humanity in an increasingly skeptical age. The royals were not simply symbols to be paraded before cameras. Their presence could bring genuine hope and comfort to vulnerable populations. Anne paired herself with Camilla and Princess Catherine for visits to an orphanage and a children's hospital. The locations had been selected after careful research, chosen specifically because of the unique needs of their residents and the potential for meaningful interaction. Prince William received his own assignments: a children's hospice and a military hospital, where his natural warmth and ability to connect with families, veterans, and young patients could shine. Other royals were distributed to additional hospitals, rehabilitation centers, and community homes. Every detail received Anne's attention. She considered the timing of arrivals, the flow of movement through each facility, the appropriate words to offer patients, the small gifts to be distributed, and even the tone of voice that should convey warmth without condescension. Buckingham Palace staff received clear instructions to ensure nothing disrupted the carefully choreographed events. The entire household buzzed with quiet anticipation, proud of the precision and thoughtfulness invested in the planning. December 24th and 26th were designated for the orphanage and hospital visits. As the first day arrived, everything appeared perfectly arranged. Camilla arrived that morning, projecting the polished elegance expected of her position. Catherine followed with her natural warmth, immediately putting both children and staff at ease. Princess Anne conducted final checks, ensuring every element aligned with her exacting standards. The orphanage welcomed them with genuine enthusiasm. Children's laughter echoed through corridors as the royals entered. Catherine engaged naturally, kneeling to meet children at eye level, while Camilla followed with measured grace. Anne observed from a respectful distance, noting every interaction and ready to intervene if circumstances required. Then, something caught Catherine's attention. While other children rushed forward with excitement, one small figure remained motionless in a slightly open room, staring out a window. The contrast was striking. Every other child bubbled with joy, their excitement filling the hallways. But this little girl stayed frozen in place, seemingly unaware of or uninterested in the royal presence. Catherine signaled silently to Anne and Camilla. Anne's experienced eyes immediately understood. Without hesitation, she moved toward the room, navigating carefully past the television cameras documenting the event. Camilla remained where she stood, her expression tightening with what appeared to be reluctance. Catherine stepped forward, her concern evident, and whispered to Camilla that there was a child who needed their attention. What happened next would become the catalyst for everything that followed. Camilla, now aware of the situation, glanced into the room where Anne had already reached the girl. She straightened, and a flicker of something between indignation and disgust crossed her face. Her response was sharp and unmistakable. She stated plainly that she could not be expected as queen consort to set foot in such a dirty place. Her words carried a sting of entitlement that caught Catherine completely off guard. "This was not about protocol or scheduling," Catherine responded. "This was about a child in need. The girl required warmth and presence, not excuses about status or cleanliness." Anne intervened with her characteristic calm but unyielding tone. This situation transcended status and privilege. It demanded basic human kindness. She urged Camilla to step into the room, yet Camilla did not move, even as cameras continued recording everything. The conversation, though whispered, carried an unmistakable tension. Anne, mindful of the cameras, reminded Catherine that they were being televised. An argument among royals in front of vulnerable children would create its own scandal. Catherine's response was immediate and clear. The optics did not matter. What mattered was the child in that room, nothing else. Together, Anne and Catherine re-entered the room. Anne approached gently, her hand lightly touching the girl's back as she offered a soft greeting. The child slowly turned, and what they saw took them both by surprise. Her face bore the marks of severe burns, deep scars that had healed but left permanent reminders of trauma. The girl's eyes were wide and filled with wariness born from months of pain and isolation. Catherine crouched to meet her gaze and asked her name. The girl whispered that her name was Pearl. Her voice carried the fragility of someone who had learned not to expect kindness. Anne smiled reassuringly and promised Pearl that she was safe, that everything would be okay, that they were there with her. Pearl's voice trembled as she asked a question that revealed the depth of her trauma. She wanted to know when her mother was coming back. Catherine and Anne exchanged a glance heavy with understanding. Anne asked Pearl gently if she could share what had happened. The story Pearl told was devastating. There had been a fire. Her brother, sister, and mother had been caught in it and died. Pearl had spent months in the hospital recovering from her burns, but the scars remained fresh both physically and emotionally. Before the fire, robbers had come to their home and shot her father. Her mother had told her that her father had gone to heaven and would return, but Pearl had never seen him again. Now, 3 months after losing the rest of her family, Pearl was told they would come back too, but she understood on some level that this was not true. The other children, Pearl explained with heartbreaking clarity, avoided her. They called her a monster because of her appearance. She pointed toward the other children, her eyes filling with tears. Anne's voice softened as she reached out. She told Pearl in no uncertain terms that she was not a monster. She was brave. She was no longer alone. Both Anne and Catherine were there, and they would help her. Pearl blinked, processing this unexpected warmth, asking quietly if this could really be true. Anne answered with gentle certainty. Pearl was safe now. She was a princess, and princesses are never truly alone. She was loved, and people cared for her. As they walked Pearl out of the room, her steps were tentative but steadier than before. The cameras captured the moment, but in Anne and Catherine's minds, the focus remained entirely on this small, fragile life beginning to heal. Anne continued whispering reassurances, reminding Pearl of her strength, of her survival through horrors no child should endure. By the time they rejoined the other children, Pearl's demeanor had shifted. She no longer appeared as the frightened, withdrawn girl from minutes before. She had become part of something larger, surrounded by people who genuinely cared. Though the physical scars remained, both Anne and Catherine saw something new in her eyes, a spark of hope that had been absent before. Anne knelt once more and made Pearl a promise. She would be okay. They would help her. She would play, laugh, and feel safe again. Pearl looked up, small tears running down her scarred cheeks, but a tiny smile breaking through. It was the first sign of trust she had allowed herself in months. Anne held her hand, whispering that she was not alone, not forgotten, and deeply loved. As they walked toward the main hall with Pearl between them, Catherine and Anne shared a quiet glance of understanding. They had witnessed enormous pain and remarkable resilience, and they understood that sometimes presence and kindness matter infinitely more than any protocol or status. The warmth of that moment with Pearl, however, was quickly overshadowed by what came next. As the group reached the main hall of the orphanage, Camilla adjusted her posture in a way that signaled her intention to deliver the prepared closing speech. The event had stretched nearly an hour, and her impatience had become increasingly visible to everyone present. Anne, still holding Pearl's small hand, gently transferred the girl to Catherine's care, whispering words of continued reassurance. Pearl's tiny fingers wrapped around Catherine's hand, the trust between them now beginning to take root after the emotional breakthrough of the morning. Anne turned to Camilla with a firm expression and questioned what was happening. These children needed genuine attention and presence, not a rushed departure disguised as duty fulfilled. Camilla's response was blunt and revealing. The place stank. The children were crying. The halls smelled unpleasant. She had not been made to linger in such uncomfortable conditions. Anne's eyes narrowed with barely contained frustration. That reasoning provided no excuse for abandoning basic compassion. Camilla was meant to lead by example, and even if she wished to leave, beginning her speech while Anne was still engaged with the children violated both protocol and basic respect. Anne reminded her that being a senior royal came with responsibilities, not just privileges, and she needed to act accordingly. Camilla's irritation flared into open defiance. She questioned Anne's authority and reminded everyone within earshot that she held the title of Queen Consort, not Anne. The implication was clear. Status trumped everything else, including common decency. The cameras continued recording every tense exchange, capturing a conflict that palace public relations teams would soon desperately wish had never occurred. Anne maintained her composure with visible effort, gesturing subtly to staff members to continue with the event rather than allowing the situation to deteriorate further. Camilla eventually delivered a brief, hurried address that fulfilled her technical obligation without conveying any genuine warmth or connection. Catherine, meanwhile, remained focused on the children, kneeling among them and sharing kind words, while Pearl stayed close to Anne's protective presence. The little girl's face slowly brightened as she absorbed the care and attention surrounding her. 40 minutes later, at precisely 2:30 in the afternoon, Camilla took the microphone again. Anne did not object this time, though the tension in the room had become almost suffocating. What followed sent shockwaves through everyone present and would soon reverberate far beyond the orphanage walls. Camilla began by offering thanks with a tone that dripped with thinly veiled contempt. She acknowledged that being present in these conditions was certainly something, then proceeded to comment on the resilience of children trying to make sense of what she described as untidiness and disorder. She observed little faces attempting to smile amid chaos and suggested that the less than pleasant air of the place required considerable patience to endure day after day. Several adults shifted uncomfortably. Some children looked confused by the strange tone of her words. Catherine's hand instinctively moved to comfort Pearl, who clutched her sleeve more tightly. Camilla continued, her remarks becoming increasingly pointed. She questioned how Anne and Catherine managed to supervise such a place, suggesting it required skills that perhaps not everyone possessed. Experience and competence might be necessary, she implied, though she observed only effort rather than expertise. The head of the orphanage stood in stunned disbelief, clutching the ceremonial donation check Camilla had brought. Her lips parted, but no words emerged. The remarks had been sharp and cutting, mocking not only the children and their circumstances, but also the two royals who had shown genuine compassion. When Camilla finally handed over the check, it felt almost incidental. The damage of her words lingered heavily in the air, leaving staff and children in uncomfortable silence. Princess Anne stepped forward and took the microphone with calm authority. Her voice carried both dignity and genuine warmth as she addressed everyone present. She emphasized that they were there to recognize courage, not to mock it. These children had endured circumstances that no one should face, yet they remained hopeful, resilient, and full of potential. The care provided by staff and the love shown by every helper deserved respect and appreciation, not dismissive criticism. Anne knelt to Pearl's eye level and spoke directly to her. Pearl was not alone. She was seen, valued, and loved. All the children there were part of a family and community that cared for them. Their dignity deserved celebration, not belittlement. Anne's voice softened further as she addressed the other children and their guardians. She urged everyone to ensure Pearl felt safe, welcome, and part of the group. Pearl had shown immense bravery, and that day they honored her story along with the stories of all the children present. Pearl's eyes glistened with tears as she listened. The older children around her began shedding their own tears, touched by her courage and the recognition she was finally receiving. Catherine held Pearl's hand and made a quiet promise that they would return and ensure every child knew they were important and loved. By the time the royals departed, the atmosphere had transformed dramatically. Where tension and insult had dominated moments before, warmth and genuine connection now filled the space. Pearl, who had been so isolated, slowly found herself embraced by the older children. Laughter returned in tentative bursts, and the first fragile threads of friendship began forming among children who had witnessed something important, adults who truly cared, and one adult whose cruelty had been answered with grace and compassion. What happened at the orphanage, however, did not remain contained within its walls. Within hours, the story escaped into the wider world, and the media seized upon it with immediate intensity. Some outlets focused on the tenderness displayed by Princess Anne and Catherine toward Pearl. They highlighted the quiet compassion, the comforting words, and the powerful image of Anne holding the burned child's hand. Those clips painted a picture of humanity and genuine care that reflected well on the monarchy's stated values. But other media outlets chose a dramatically different angle. They replayed Camilla's speech repeatedly, slowing it down and analyzing every word and facial expression. In a media landscape where controversy generates far more attention than kindness, the mocking tone, the comments about dirt and unpleasant smells, and the thinly veiled insults overshadowed everything else. The compassion shown to Pearl was buried beneath waves of outrage and criticism. Social media exploded with unprecedented speed and fury. On the platform formerly known as Twitter, users wasted no time sharing their reactions. A hashtag demanding respect for the children began trending within hours, spreading across continents and accumulating millions of mentions. One widely shared comment stated that children do not choose their circumstances, and a crown does not grant anyone the right to mock suffering. Another post highlighted Princess Anne's demonstration of true leadership through compassion over ego, calling the rest of the visit shameful. A third comment went viral almost instantly, questioning whether royalty that thinks so little of vulnerable children should continue pretending to care about public service at all. Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere resembled a war room. Advisors rushed frantically between offices with phones pressed to their ears, desperately attempting to contain the rapidly spreading damage. Public relations teams engaged in heated debates over wording, timing, and whether silence or an immediate apology would cause less harm. Every option they considered seemed inadequate or potentially damaging in different ways. No official statement was released during those first critical hours. The palace struggled to protect its carefully maintained public image, but the cracks in that facade were becoming impossible to hide or ignore. By nightfall, internal reports confirmed the severity of the situation. Public approval ratings for the royal family had dropped 15% in less than 12 hours. Such a sharp decline was unprecedented in modern royal history. Never before had a single public appearance caused such immediate and measurable damage to the monarchy's standing. Even more troubling, palace advisors could identify no clear path forward. The continued silence only fueled additional speculation, and that speculation was rapidly hardening into genuine public anger directed at the institution itself. Then came a development that truly shocked everyone within the palace walls. The following morning, a formal letter arrived at Buckingham Palace marked urgent. It came from the director of St. Joseph's Hospital, the facility that Camilla, Anne, and Catherine were scheduled to visit on December 26th. The letter's wording was polite and carefully measured, but its content was absolutely devastating. The director explained that given the recent media attention and strongly negative public reaction, he did not believe this was an appropriate time for a royal visit. The hospital's priority, he stated clearly, was protecting its patients, staff, and institutional reputation. It was an outright refusal of a scheduled royal engagement. No one had ever said no to the royal household in this manner. Not openly, not formally, not in writing that could be shared and publicized. The letter passed from hand to hand among senior palace staff in stunned silence. This was not merely a scheduling complication or public relations setback. It represented a fundamental challenge to royal authority and relevance. If one respected institution could publicly refuse a royal visit, others might quickly follow. The authority of the crown, which had always been treated as essentially unquestionable, suddenly appeared fragile and conditional. King Charles learned of these developments during a quiet morning consultation with his medical advisors. He was already physically weakened from ongoing cancer treatment, but the news hit him with particular force. The approval rating collapse, the viral public outrage, and most significantly, the hospital's unprecedented refusal were laid out before him in stark detail. His expression hardened as he absorbed the full implications. This situation had transcended one poorly chosen speech or one mishandled visit. It now threatened the fundamental integrity and public standing of the monarchy itself. The king did not hesitate or delay. He immediately summoned Prince William and Princess Anne to his private study. When they arrived, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken understanding. This was not a meeting for debate, discussion, or exploring alternative approaches. Before either William or Anne could speak, Charles broke the silence. He addressed Anne directly, his voice steady but weighted with genuine regret. He owed her an apology. What had happened was completely unacceptable. She had been insulted and undermined while carrying out her duty with grace and compassion, and such treatment should never have been permitted under his authority. Anne inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement, accepting the apology without words. She understood the weight and significance behind it. Charles then turned to address both of them with firm resolve. He would act immediately and decisively. The title of Queen Consort would be stripped effective that very day. There were no gasps of surprise, no objections, and no attempts to soften or delay the decision. William and Anne exchanged brief glances and nodded in agreement. They asked no questions about implementation and suggested No alternatives. This was not a moment for negotiation or political calculation. They trusted that the king would do what was right, not just for the crown's image, but for the fundamental values it claimed to represent. They rose, paid their respects, and left the room quietly. Within moments, Charles summoned his communications director. There was no hesitation and no prolonged discussion about strategy or messaging. An official statement was drafted, reviewed once, and released immediately across all royal communication platforms. The statement acknowledged that recent events and the conduct displayed during a charitable visit had made clarification necessary. Compassion, humility, and respect, especially toward the vulnerable, formed the foundations of royal service. Any behavior contradicting these principles was unacceptable regardless of status or title. Effective immediately, the title bestowed upon his wife had been withdrawn. While she remained his wife and would continue residing within the palace, she would no longer hold any royal duties or privileges. The king offered his deepest apologies to the children, staff, and institutions affected by what had occurred. The king did not stop with the public statement. That same day, Charles personally telephoned the medical director of St. Joseph's Hospital. No aides monitored the call, and no prepared script guided his words. He spoke not as a monarch, but as a father, and a man who fully understood the weight of disappointment and broken trust. He listened carefully to the director's concerns, acknowledged the harm that had been caused, and took complete personal responsibility. His voice carried sincerity and humility, rather than royal authority or expectation. By the end of that conversation, the hospital agreed to reinstate the visit. Within hours, news of the king's decisive action spread globally. Headlines praised his accountability and moral clarity. Commentators spoke admiringly of dignity, responsibility, and boundaries that were long overdue. Online reactions flooded social media platforms with overwhelmingly positive sentiment. Users commented that this represented true leadership and accountability at the highest level. Many expressed relief that the crown had finally chosen humanity and principle over image and privilege. The following day, Princess Anne and Catherine arrived at St. Joseph's Hospital exactly as originally planned. Cameras captured quiet, meaningful moments throughout the visit. Hands were held, genuine words were exchanged, and smiles returned to faces that had been uncertain about royal sincerity. Children laughed, families felt truly seen and valued, and the visit embodied everything the crown had always claimed to represent. There was no sign of Camilla anywhere, because when someone treats their privileged position carelessly and cruelly, that position eventually disappears regardless of how grand it once seemed. Camilla would learn this lesson the hardest way possible, watching from palace windows as the stage she had fought so desperately to claim slipped completely from her grasp, removed not by her critics, but by the consequences of her own choices.